harvester truly different from that which he seeks to harvest? What is even a harvest? We have something harvest moon, a lot of people relate it to agriculture, what time to harvest crops. But what actually do I mean when I say harvester? What is harvester? I first came into contact with this, I'll call it an idea, in and around 2017, 2016, 2017. I was around 15 years old, I believe. And I won't say too much about the experience itself, but in short, I ended up having visions and hearing things which told me that this planet was going to be harvested, and that it was, one, not the real world, and two, a prison, like a prison planet. And that was my first experience with what this harvester system meant. So there's a video game that came out in and around 1997. It was a computer game. It's called Harvester. It's a pretty dark game, all things considered, but the symbolism in the game is very telling, and if anyone really wants to understand not the full nature of this, but a watered down aspect of it, then I wouldn't suggest anything really, but I would say look into Harvester, the game. So in that game, I'm just going to give this as a quick example. You play as a man he's being essentially recruited to join this mysterious lodge organization which controls this entire town, which is called Harvest. And the lodge has him run around, do mundane and violent things. And there's a point in the story of that game where you're asked to either join the harvesters in what they called the real world, or to remain in Harvest and have like a normal life. And essentially, it's revealed to our main character at the end, and this is a pretty old game, so most people, if they even know what this game is, have already seen this ending. It's revealed to him at the end that he's he's jacked in, that's literally the word used, jacked into a simulation, and him and this other woman are the only two real people in there. Now, obviously, I don't believe that's how the situation is now, but it's definitely quite disturbing, and the choice that the main character is given is either join the Harvesters or start a life with that woman. I just give this as a cursory example because the game is very allegorical, very symbolical, and what is meant by harvest. So, when we look at harvest on the human level, we usually think of crops. But in my mind, in my vision, I don't view human beings as being too different from crops. Not at all, actually. I don't think they're very much different. They both grow from a seed, and they both die. They're both of life. And if we want to get into the spiritual aspect, of course, we can call it Brahman, the infinite. They're connected that way, too. But when we get into what is a harvest of a human being, it's what do we do to harvest plants? Well, you cut them down, and then what is provided by the plant, be it some sort of drug or some sort of food, that's the sustenance, so to speak. So the obvious implication from my experience And this is what I thought then, is that we had some sort of energy that these things were parasiting off of, or uh, siphoning. And the longer like I said, I'm only 20, but I've been around long enough to know that there's entities that are outside of the people can't see them. I guess we'll call them jinn. And they exist as thought forms, essentially. And if you want to say that they manipulate human events, they manipulate the psyches of people who don't understand how thought works, you can say that. But they go hand in hand with the harvesters of this system. And that's what this system is all about. You grow up and then you die. It's very, very sad, but it's true. So, going back to the idea of controller is controlled, observer is observed, harvester is harvested, what exactly am I saying with that? Well, I'm mainly begging a question, not really saying much of anything. But is the harvester that which is doing the harvest? Is it separate from what it's harvesting? It's a good question to ask, I feel. Because if we're considering that the entrance to this Earth, to this grand lodge of as it's called, our planet, if it is internal, and that you got here by way of the infinite kingdom, then I think the implication being made is kind of maybe unclear. Hold on. If we both came from the same origin point, then there's no way we're actually separate. They may have lost their light, but I don't know if there's any true separateness other than the divide that has been created between us, which is, it is extremely difficult to summarize in words. It's not something that I myself can personally summarize. But yeah, today's Saturday, Saturn's day, and this goes hand in hand with the harvest, which, if you know anything about agriculture, is a specific time, so it has to do with time, Chronos, Saturn, for the harvest. It's just, I'm putting out ideas to think about, because it is related. What is time? It's a partition. It's a limit set on something which has no limit. So the infinite. I'll go back to the same question. How can a finite reality exist with nothing to build from? If it's finite, that it just implies that something which isn't finite exists, I don't know if we'd say in tangent to it, but simultaneously, outside of time. So you have time here, and then timelessness. You have the externalized world here, and then you have the internalized world. You have the world of the mind and the world of the heart. So it is another duality, but it's the core of literally the core of this duality is that heart and mind dual. The sensory versus the spiritual, the external versus the internal. I use the word externalizations and external a lot, but that is what this world is. It's the external world. So something I remember in the Bible was I've also seen this explanation given as the Matthew, I forget exactly what number, but it says, I'll make ye fishers of men. And the implication there is that they're going to bait people like they're fish and use and basically sell their souls in the material and in the spiritual. So both physically and mentally and spiritually, I guess you want to say. I don't use the word spiritual too much. I mean, these things are just so beyond the typical vocabulary and scope of like language conversation that I can't really even articulate it myself. Once you've had, can I say I've experienced the infinite while I'm imprisoned here? I will say for now that it is, perhaps maybe it's just a thought that I had as a kid, but I will leave it at that. I can see the infinite nature of things. If you've ever seen a fractal, you can build on a fractal for infinity, literally, because, I mean, this system is finite and it will crash because it's a finite system. A house divided cannot stand. But what I'm saying is, if you've ever seen something like a Sierpinski triangle, you can just keep doing those little triangles and they'll always be, I don't want to say perfect, but mathematically, yes, they're perfect. And you can do that for infinity. So that's what I mean by saying the infinite nature of reality contained within all things. But we're in a weird situation right now because on one hand I don't want to seem like I'm trying to make people scared, but on the other hand I do have a legitimate concern about this idea of a harvest, and this being the point of this system. But that's my speculation. Go into it for yourself. It could be that I have misinterpreted, but the core of my knowledge, when I first came into the idea that this place wasn't the real world and it was some form of mock prison, that it was from that experience which I had, and I've had many other visions which are disturbing, and I mean I can't describe them to you. I mean there are physical forms, like actual like mentally conceivable things, but the rest of it is just I don't really I'm thinking of the word cloud, but it's pretty vivid. I don't really know how to describe it to you, but people don't really get into this sort of thing because, the modern world has so many things for someone to latch on to for a long time and forget anything, maybe that there's a different world that one came from. But another thing which, like I said, comes into this is this going to be, like, too scary for people? Should I even, like, do anything with this? I'm not the only one who thinks the way I do, and when I first looked into this, because I don't think I'd ever heard the idea of this being a prison planet used for harvest was ever presented to me. I think that really was just based on that experience. But when I'm talking about the infinite, I'm not like versed in what I'm talking about, but I have this strange thing. It's a thing, I guess. It's a thing with me that I think is that piece of the infinite. And I've done something. I don't really. It's not like it's something I've done just recently either. It's something which happened when I was a kid, and you could say maybe I just had a really active imagination, but it's the thing is so vivid. I don't. It looks like a galaxy. It's purple. I don't know. I think I talked about it briefly, but I'm just trying to. I'm not really sure. Talk about stuff. So I guess back to the theme of the video. The reason I'm mentioning the Infinite Kingdom at all when talking of Archons is because I was asking the question, is the Harvester, the Archons, are they separate from us? Are they actually separate, or are they just pretending to be separate? It's not an unreasonable question. So, the story that I looked into was in the Gnostic texts. There's two, and it's one of the Archons where they were we're viewing the Archons here as the harvesters of Earth, the ones who set up the construct for that purpose, where they were expelled from the infinite kingdom, or the Pleroma, because they wouldn't bow down to Adam, who is the allegorical or symbolical representation of human race, man. And for that, they were expelled to the realm of matter and gave birth to this place. Demiurge, if you will. There's another story. I can't remember where I read this from, but it detailed the Archons abusing Sophia and getting expelled for that reason as well. With I believe it's allegorically the wrong idea being I don't want to say ejaculated, but ejaculated into the Pleroma, or the infinite. So like death, the idea of death and all this nastiness that is here. They ejaculated those thoughts into the infinite, or tried to at least, and that's part of why they're expelled here. I don't know what's going to happen as a result of me uploading this, but I would assume I'll be fine. I just wanted to talk about this a little bit and see if anyone also have been asking such questions. Observer, we know, observed. Ego, observed. Eyes, observed. You have a fly buzzing about. He observes you. You observe it. Observer is observed. Okay? You try to control it. It controls you. Controller is controlled. But what of the harvester? Is the harvester harvested by something bigger than it? Is there a bit of a hierarchy even in that sense? It seems like a pointless question, but I feel it does pose some relevance here. The Archons, Jinn, the architects, that's what I'm talking about. Very mysterious, the most secretive beings, very secretive and unapproachable. Like, you can't really get into contact with them at all easily, so take what I'm saying as nothing, I guess. And don't try to interface. Don't look up guides on how to interface with these beings. You don't understand what they are. Just telling you, be very aware of what you're doing and be serious about this, because it really isn't a joke. We're trapped right now. I mean, I've made jokes about it in the past. Haha, we're in the computer matrix, lol. It's actually not a joke to me anymore, because I'm realizing just how merciless and ruthless this is, and I don't know, it just seems very, very cruel, like a very cruel thing to do, to trap something in a holographic simulacra and harvest them endlessly over and over and over again. And the worst part being, they don't even remember that that's what this place is for. So that's something to remember. That's not. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that for now. But another interesting thing I wanted to leave you with: what do you harvest crops with? Well, you harvest it with a sickle. And what's death usually portrayed as carrying? Sickle. And I believe I've even seen some symbolism of Kronos, where he has a sickle, who is the father of time, I believe also agriculture, and something else. I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, in the hot brine of Father Time, but yeah, in the hot brine of Father Time. It kind of burns. It's tense, dense. X is tense. There's even a movie called X is Tens. It's definitely a really strange construct we live in.